Look at Chile's coast on a satellite map at night, you'll notice an unusual pattern. Scattered points of light dot the shoreline, ports shipping copper, lithium, and salmon, but no sprawling coastal cities like Rio or Sydney, no major urban centers along the water. Those bright spots, they're not cities, they're isolated industrial facilities, loading docks for resources extracted deep inland. For decades, Chile's economy treated the coast not as a place to live, but as a staging area to be utilized from a distance. This created a paradox, an economy that depends on the coast, but a population that avoids it. Why did Chile build an economy of outposts instead of cities? Chile is fundamentally constrained between two immense parallel mountain ranges. To the east, the towering Andes Mountains, the longest continental mountain range in the world, studded with over 600 volcanoes. To the west, the lower but still formidable Chilean Coast Range. These mountain ranges, they act like a geographical funnel, concentrating almost all life into the fertile depression between them, the Central Valley. This valley is the exception to Chile's landscape, a temperate region with rich soil suitable for agriculture and settlement. But to the north and south lie two very different coastal challenges. The north is extremely arid, while the south is excessively wet and fragmented. Chile doesn't just have one different coastline, it has two distinct types of challenging coasts. Head north from the Central Valley and you encounter the Atacama Desert, the driest non-polar desert on the entire planet. The aridity is remarkable. In some parts of the Atacama, rainfall has never been recorded. It's 50 times drier than California's Death Valley. This extreme dryness, it results from a powerful double rain shadow. The colossal Andes block moisture from the Atlantic to the east. The Coast Range intercepts air currents from the Pacific to the west. The cold, north-flowing Humboldt Current reinforces this effect, cooling air above it and preventing rain clouds from forming. The result is a climate of significant extremes. Landscapes of rock and sand experience some of Earth's most intense solar radiation. The only reliable water source is marine fog that locals call the Camanchaca. This dense fog rolls in from the ocean, providing minimal moisture for a limited ecosystem of lichens, algae, and specialized cacti. But it's insufficient for large-scale agriculture or urban development. Permanent towns like the port city of Antofagasta survive only because of expensive desalination plants built primarily for the region's mining operations. For centuries, the northern coast was too barren to support substantial civilization. Travel south of the Central Valley and you encounter the opposite problem. The southern third of Chile, it isn't starved of water, it receives far too much. This is Chilean Patagonia, where the solid coastline fragments into a complex network of fjords, channels, islands, and glaciers. It's a landscape carved by ice and shaped by severe weather patterns. The climate contrasts sharply with the north. Cool, frequently rain-soaked, and consistently windy. The western slopes of the Andes meet the sea directly, receiving intense moisture from westerly winds. In high rainfall zones, annual precipitation, it typically ranges from 200 to 300 inches, with some fjord areas exceeding 275 inches. The weather is notably unpredictable. Locals say that in Patagonia, you can experience all 4 seasons in a single day. But the terrain itself presents the greatest obstacle. There's no coastal plain suitable for development. The landscape consists of steep mountains, dense temperate rainforests, and the vast northern and southern Patagonian ice fields, the largest ice mass outside the polar regions. Human settlement is limited to small isolated communities. Many were established only in the 20th century. Most remain disconnected from the rest of the country by land. You can't drive to them. Access is only by boat or plane. This geographic reality meant that a unified coastal development strategy was never feasible. It would have required 2 completely different approaches, massive water infrastructure in the north, and an extremely complex network of ferries and bridges spanning fjords in the south. Faced with these challenging coasts, the mild, fertile Central Valley became the natural path for national development. The concentration of Chile's population in its central region isn't a modern development. Its origins trace back centuries, established long before European arrival. The great Inca Empire expanded south, but was decisively stopped at the Maule River by Mapuche resistance. This historic confrontation established the Central Valley not just as a favorable climate zone, but as a distinct cultural and political center. When the Spanish arrived in the 1540s, they found limited gold, but discovered significant agricultural potential in the Central Valley's Mediterranean climate. They founded Santiago inland in 1541. From this base, agricultural towns formed the colony's foundation. Ports like Valparaiso served primarily as functional export points for inland production. This inward orientation was reinforced by over 300 years of conflict with the Mapuche to the south, establishing the Central Valley as the nation's secure core. Meaningful settlement of southern Chile only began in the late 19th century, after military campaigns known as the pacification of the Araucania. By then, the nation's demographic, political, and economic center was already established in the central inland region. This history created a national approach focused on internal development rather than maritime expansion. For centuries, the coasts, they were viewed not as gateways to the world, but as challenging frontiers, an arid desert to the north and a conflict zone to the south, to be utilized from a distance rather than settled. Beyond difficult terrain and complex history, Chile faces another significant factor that has influenced its relationship with the coast: seismic activity. Chile sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire and ranks among the world's most seismically active countries. The Nazca tectonic plate moves under the South American plate at nearly 4 inches per year. This geological pressure builds over decades and releases through major earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis. The nation's history includes numerous seismic catastrophes. Major earthquakes have repeatedly struck coastal population centers with notable frequency, creating ongoing concerns about coastal development. The Great Chilean Earthquake of 1960 exemplifies this threat. On May 22nd, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded, magnitude 9.5, ruptured the fault line off the coast of Valdivia. The initial shaking was severe, but the following tsunami caused extensive destruction. Within 15 minutes, massive waves reaching up to 82 feet high struck hundreds of miles of coastline. Entire towns, like Chile, were completely destroyed. The earthquake permanently altered the landscape. Coastal areas sank by several meters, permanently flooding extensive farmland and forest. The disaster displaced an estimated 2 million people. The tsunami's energy crossed the entire Pacific, causing fatalities in Hawaii, 61 people, Japan, 138 people, and the Philippines, 32 people. The 1960 Valdivia earthquake remains a significant reference point in Chile, demonstrating that coastal areas can face sudden catastrophic destruction. This differs from predictable seasonal threats like hurricanes. A magnitude 9.5 earthquake represents an immediate landscape-altering event that challenges the concept of permanent coastal settlement. This risk, it's made the relative stability of the inland Central Valley not just practically convenient, but strategically important. Choosing inland locations, it's not merely about avoiding harsh weather, it's about avoiding an inherently unstable continental margin. Chile's modern economy has reinforced its historical pattern of inland concentration. Outside the Central Valley's agricultural region, economic development has been driven by intensive resource extraction from specific geographic locations, rather than integrated coastal commerce. This created isolated economic facilities, industrial centers dedicated to single purposes, rather than networks of diversified coastal cities. These function more as specialized facilities rather than traditional urban centers. The hyper-arid Atacama Desert contains the world's largest copper reserves and significant lithium deposits. Mining accounts for over half of Chile's total export revenue. However, this economic activity, it's fundamentally inland-based. Major mines like Chuquicamata and Escondida are located deep in the desert. Coastal cities like Antofagasta, and Iquique exist primarily as logistical support centers, service hubs, and ports designed to export raw minerals to global markets. Their economic fortunes depend on volatile commodity prices. Antofagasta is one of Chile's most expensive cities due to high mining wages, but it's generally viewed as an industrial port with limited cultural amenities. These aren't organic cities that developed over time, they're functional extensions of inland industry. In the far south, the cold, deep, sheltered fjords of Patagonia proved suitable for industrial-scale aquaculture. In recent decades, Chile became the world's second-largest producer of farmed salmon. But, like northern mines, these salmon farms operate as remote, isolated facilities. The industry has faced environmental challenges, including pollution from fish waste and extensive antibiotic use. This has created tension with local populations, particularly indigenous communities, who view the farms as threats to their traditional waters and way of life. Chile's economic model, it's worked against coastal urban development. By focusing on exporting raw materials from highly specific remote locations, minerals from the desert, and fish from the fjords, the country never developed economic incentives to build the complex, interconnected networks that typically create thriving coastal societies. The required infrastructure, it's direct and point-to-point, roads from mines to ports, boats from farms to processing facilities. Even if history and economics had favored coastal development, the physical reality of the landscape would have presented enormous obstacles. Building and maintaining infrastructure along much of Chile's coastline, it's so expensive and technically challenging that large-scale development, it's remained impractical. The Carretera Austral, or Southern Highway, illustrates this challenge. This 770-mile road is the only semi-continuous land route through Patagonia's Aysén region. Before construction began in the 1970s, scattered settlements were completely isolated, accessible only by sea or through neighboring Argentina. The road's construction wasn't driven by economics, it was a strategic nation-building project to establish Chilean sovereignty over remote southern territory. Yet, even after decades of work, the Carretera Austral demonstrates the difficulty of infrastructure development in this environment. It remains incomplete, with extensive unpaved sections frequently damaged by extreme weather. More significantly, it's not truly continuous. The landscape requires multiple, often lengthy ferry crossings, where terrain is too steep and unstable for roads or bridges. Traveling through the Carretera Austral still requires careful planning, four-wheeled vehicles, and preparation for limited fuel and supplies in areas where cell service and gas stations are scarce. The road exemplifies the national challenge, the enormous cost and engineering requirements for blasting through solid rock, spanning deep fjords, and maintaining infrastructure in constant precipitation and harsh winters explain why a fully connected Chilean coastline remains logistically impractical. In most countries, coastal plains pivot the easiest routes for trade and transportation. In Chile, the coast represents the most difficult development frontier. The story, it becomes more interesting when comparing Chile with its geographic equivalent, Norway. Both nations are long, narrow countries defined by mountainous terrain and complex fjord-indented coastlines. Both face similar challenges of extreme weather and difficult geography. Yet, their development approaches, they've been entirely different. While Chile's population concentrated inland, Norway embraced its coast, building an integrated maritime culture. This wasn't simple geographic density, it was the result of deliberate, sustained national investment in conquering coastal isolation. The key was Hurtigruten, meaning the fast route. Founded in 1893 with government support, this state-sponsored ferry service, it had a specific mission: provide reliable, year-round transportation to isolated fishing communities along Norway's northern coast. The service became more than just transportation, it was a social and economic connection. It integrated the remote coast into the national framework. It enabled fresh fish to reach southern markets efficiently, supporting local economies. It allowed people, goods, and ideas to move freely, overcoming winter isolation. Today, the service continues operating, stopping at 34 ports during its 12-day round trip. This contrast between Chile and Norway demonstrates that while geography presents significant challenges, it doesn't determine outcomes. The limited development of Chile's coast, it isn't solely due to deserts, mountains, and fjords. It's the result of centuries of policy decisions that differed from Norway's approach. Where Norway viewed its complex coast as a national asset requiring integration, Chile viewed its coastal regions as barriers to overcome or resource zones to exploit remotely. Norway chose to invest in connection. Chile invested in extraction. Why is Chile's 4,000-mile coastline sparsely populated? It's the convergence of geography, history, and economics that directed development away from the shore. Challenging geology created difficult northern and southern coasts. Colonial priorities established the Central Valley as the national center. Seismic activity made coastal areas risky investments. An extractive economy built isolated facilities instead of connected communities. Infrastructure limitations reinforced the dominance of the inland core. Today, Chile has thousands of miles of coastline, much of it undeveloped and remote. It's a defining characteristic of national identity, but also an ongoing developmental challenge. Will this change in coming decades? Potentially. New industries like green hydrogen, lithium mining, and tourism are focusing attention back to coastal areas, possibly altering the centuries-old pattern of inland concentration. However, history suggests that geographical patterns, once established, tend to persist. The established presence of Chile's inland cities, their infrastructure, institutions, and accumulated investment represents 500 years of development that new coastal industries may find difficult to overcome. What do you think? Should Chile invest more in connecting its coastlines, or does the inland model remain more practical? Let me know in the comments below. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?